Welcome, dear listeners, to History with Herodotus, where we embark on a journey through the annals of time, exploring the intricacies of human civilization and the grand tapestry of our collective past. Today, we find ourselves in the midst of a fascinating and complex topic, the Cultural Revolution in China. This pivotal moment in modern Chinese history was a tumultuous period of social, political, and cultural upheaval that would leave an indelible mark on the nation and its people. As we delve into the origins of this revolution, let us first set the stage. Imagine yourself standing amidst the bustling streets of Beijing in the early 1960s, surrounded by the ancient Forbidden City's imposing walls and the vibrant sounds of a nation on the cusp of transformation. The air is alive with anticipation as the Chinese Communist Party, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, begins to sow the seeds of a movement that would soon engulf the entire country. The Cultural Revolution's earliest history is intricately tied to the events and ideologies of the preceding decades. In 1949, after a long and brutal civil war, the Communist Party of China, led by Mao Zedong, emerged victorious over the Nationalist Party, led by Chiang Kai-shek. The founding of the People's Republic of China marked a new era in Chinese history, with Mao Zedong as its chairman. As we navigate this period, we find ourselves in the midst of a country struggling to come to terms with its newfound identity. The 1950s saw a series of campaigns aimed at consolidating power and eliminating perceived enemies of the revolution. The campaign to suppress counter-revolutionaries, launched in 1950, targeted those deemed to be counter-revolutionary, including former Nationalist Party members, landlords, and intellectuals. This campaign set the tone for future movements as it created an atmosphere of fear and mistrust. In 1957, Mao Zedong launched the 100 Flowers campaign, which encouraged citizens to express their opinions and criticisms of the government. However, this brief period of openness was short-lived, as Mao soon cracked down on dissenting voices, labeling them as rightists and subjecting them to persecution. This campaign marked a significant turning point in Mao's rule, as he began to consolidate his power and eliminate potential threats. The Great Leap Forward, launched in 1958, was a disastrous economic campaign that aimed to rapidly industrialize and modernize China. The consequences were catastrophic, with widespread famine and economic devastation affecting millions of people. As we reflect on this period, we see the seeds of discontent being sown as the Chinese people began to question Mao's leadership and the direction of the country. The power struggle within the Communist Party also played a significant role in the lead-up to the Cultural Revolution. In 1962, Mao Zedong faced opposition from moderate leaders, including Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping, who advocated for a more pragmatic approach to economic development. This internal conflict would ultimately contribute to the unfolding of the Cultural Revolution. As we explore this critical juncture in Chinese history, we find ourselves at the threshold of a period marked by both idealism and chaos. The seeds sown in these early years would germinate into a movement that would redefine the very fabric of Chinese society. The socialist education movement, launched in 1963, was an early precursor to the Cultural Revolution, with its focus on purging rural areas of perceived counter-revolutionary elements. In May 1966, Mao Zedong and his allies launched a campaign against the Four Olds: old ideas, old culture, old customs, and old habits. This marked the beginning of the Cultural Revolution, as radicalized youth, known as Red Guards, began to mobilize and take action against perceived enemies of the revolution. As we pause at this pivotal moment, we are poised on the brink of a period that would witness the rise of radical ideology, the downfall of established leaders, and the transformation of Chinese society. Join me as we step into the midst of this revolutionary storm, where the boundaries between past and present, tradition and innovation, were about to be forever altered. Welcome back to our exploration of the Cultural Revolution in China. This marked the beginning of a tumultuous era that would witness the rise of radical ideology, the downfall of established leaders, and the transformation of Chinese society. As we delve into the heart of the Cultural Revolution, let us transport ourselves to the summer of 1966, where the streets of Beijing were abuzz with the fervor of radicalized youth. The Red Guards, a paramilitary social movement of students and young workers, had begun to mobilize, driven by their passion for revolution and their loyalty to Mao Zedong. These young radicals saw themselves as the vanguard of a new China, one that would be purged of its feudal past and forged into a socialist utopia. The Red Guards' rallies and demonstrations were a spectacle to behold, with thousands of enthusiastic youths gathered in Tiananmen Square, waving their little red books and chanting slogans. These events were not just a display of revolutionary fervor, but also a manifestation of the chaos and anarchy that would soon engulf the country. As the Red Guards took to the streets, they began to target perceived enemies of the revolution, including intellectuals, artists, and members of the educated elite. One of the most striking aspects of this period was the critique sessions, where individuals accused of counter-revolutionary activities were publicly humiliated and forced to confess their crimes. These sessions were often brutal and dehumanizing, with victims subjected to physical abuse, verbal harassment, and emotional trauma. The Red Guards saw themselves as the instruments of revolutionary justice, tasked with purging society of its perceived enemies and creating a new, socialist humanity. As the Cultural Revolution gained momentum, the country descended into chaos. Schools and universities were closed, and the economy began to grind to a halt. The rule of law gave way to mob violence, and the very fabric of Chinese society was torn asunder. The Red Guards, now emboldened by their newfound power, began to take aim at the highest echelons of the Communist Party itself, targeting moderate leaders like Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping. In August 1966, Mao Zedong reviewed a massive rally of Red Guards in Tiananmen Square, further fueling their revolutionary fervor. This event marked a turning point in the Cultural Revolution, as Mao's implicit endorsement of the Red Guards' actions emboldened them to take even more drastic measures. The consequences were catastrophic, with widespread violence, destruction of cultural artifacts, and the deaths of thousands of innocent people. As we navigate this complex web of events, it is essential to understand the ideological underpinnings of the Cultural Revolution. Mao Zedong's vision for a socialist China was rooted in his belief in the power of human will and the need for continuous revolution. He saw the Cultural Revolution as a necessary step towards creating a truly socialist society, one that would be free from the vestiges of feudalism and capitalism. However, this ideology was also marked by a deep-seated paranoia and a fear of counter-revolutionary activities. The Red Guards, driven by their loyalty to Mao and their desire for revolutionary purity, saw themselves as the guardians of the revolution, tasked with rooting out any perceived threats to its survival. This mindset led to a culture of suspicion and mistrust, where individuals were encouraged to inform on their neighbors, colleagues, and even family members. As we reflect on this period, it is clear that the Cultural Revolution was a complex and multifaceted phenomenon, driven by a combination of ideological, social, and economic factors. The Red Guards' passion for revolution and their desire for social change were genuine, but they were also exploited by Mao Zedong and his allies to further their own power and interests. Join me as we continue to navigate the complexities of this pivotal moment in modern Chinese history. Welcome back to our exploration of the Cultural Revolution in China. As we continue our journey through this pivotal moment in modern Chinese history, We find ourselves in the late 1960s and early 1970s, a period marked by the gradual decline of the Red Guard's influence and the eventual downfall of the Gang of Four. By 1968, the Cultural Revolution had reached a critical juncture. The initial fervor of the Red Guards had begun to wane, and the country was plunged into chaos. Mao Zedong, realizing that the situation was spiraling out of control, began to take steps to restore order. He dispatched the People's Liberation Army to key cities and provinces, tasking them with quelling the violence and restoring stability. The PLA's intervention marked a significant turning point in the Cultural Revolution. The army's presence helped to curb the excesses of the Red Guards, and slowly but surely, order began to be restored. However, this came at a great cost. Many innocent people had been caught up in the violence, and the country's infrastructure, economy, and social fabric had been severely damaged. As the Cultural Revolution drew to a close, the Gang of Four, comprising Jiang Qing, Zhang Qiao, Yao Wenyuan, and Wang Hongwen, emerged as the dominant force in Chinese politics. This radical faction, closely allied with Mao Zedong, sought to perpetuate the revolution and maintain their grip on power. However, their extreme ideology and policies only served to further destabilize the country. In 1976, the death of Mao Zedong marked a significant shift in the balance of power. The Gang of Four, realizing that their influence was waning, attempted to seize control of the government. However, they were thwarted by a coalition of moderate leaders, including Deng Xiaoping, who had been purged during the Cultural Revolution but had managed to survive and even thrive in exile. Deng Xiaoping's rise to power marked the beginning of a new era in Chinese history. He implemented a series of economic reforms, opening up China to the world and setting the country on a path towards rapid modernization. The consequences of the Cultural Revolution were still being felt, but under Deng's leadership, China began to heal and rebuild. As we reflect on this period, it is clear that the Cultural Revolution was a complex and multifaceted phenomenon, driven by a combination of ideological, social, and economic factors. The Red Guards' passion for revolution and their desire for social change were genuine, but they were also exploited by Mao Zedong and his allies to further their own power and interests. In conclusion, the Cultural Revolution was a pivotal moment in modern Chinese history, marked by chaos, violence, and destruction. However, it also laid the groundwork for the country's eventual rise as a global superpower. As we look back on this period, we are reminded of the importance of understanding the complexities of history and the need to learn from the mistakes of the past. As Mao Zedong once said, a revolution is not a dinner party, or writing an essay, or painting a picture, or doing embroidery. It cannot be so refined, so leisurely and gentle. The Cultural Revolution was indeed a brutal and transformative event, one that continues to shape China's trajectory to this day. That's all for today's episode. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Cultural Revolution. Join us next time as we explore more fascinating topics in history. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that, to understand the present, we must first understand the past.